Nukapedia, the Fallout Wiki presents JunkRadio, our monthly pitcast of Fallout news and other features from around the wasteland. Happy anniversary, everyone. In this month's episode, we'll start with an extended edition of the Nukapedia Network news, covering the latest from the Fallout 25th anniversary celebrations, as well as the upcoming release of Nuka World On Tour to the public test server, and a ton of community events. At 9:47, we'll go deep into Brotherhood lore and explore the bloody history of the founding of the Brotherhood, as recorded by Captain Maxson himself. From there at 19 minutes, Publick Occurances interviews Ray and Lucy from the 5 responders who talk about Roleplays, Machinima and Fallout for Hope. We're also starting a new series within Tech Talk where Wafflecop will let us know about the tools of the trade of the Dataminers at 45:20. Ever Reliable LS is celebrating the release of the Pitt by letting all would-be responders know about Trogs at 52:35, and lastly at 55:35 I'll be talking to Ashfall from Fallout Ashfall, who are bringing Fallout across the Pacific and onto the island of Hawaii. Junk Radio is an open access podcast. If you want to be a part of it or have an idea for a show, email us at nukafalloutwiki@gmail.com.
This episode of Junk Radio is sponsored in part by Moriarty's Saloon. Moriarty's Saloon, the best drinks in the wasteland. And if anyone says otherwise, they're probably just Lucas Sims.
This is Nukapedia Network News. I'm Agent C, bringing you the latest Fallout, community and wiki news. The public test server will be showing off Nuka World On Tour from October 13. In addition to some theme content, this update is promising a lot of other dates, but here's a quick summary. Gunter is promising a rootin' tootin' good time in a Wild West show and is looking for volunteers to be a part of it. You'll be able to take on the role of an outlaw, fleecing and raiding the town whilst defending your hole from robotic sheriffs. Meanwhile, under the big top, Cappy and Bottle will be hosting Spin the Wheel. Press the button to spin the wheel, and then defend the mascots from the challenge it selects. Brahmins, fragstags, and more are promised, but you'll need to survive 5 rounds or more to win a prize. Those looking for a romantic getaway might want to check out the Tunnel of Love. Unfortunately, there's been some delays in construction, but those with a more mechanical mindset might want to volunteer to trek into the abandoned mineshaft hosting the attraction to try and fix it. There's more work for mechanics as Pete needs air filters during the carnival, but a massive creature appears to be guarding the spare parts he needs. You'll join a group of other dwellers to take on and blast the beast, ideally from a distance, but beware, failing to blast from a distance is just gonna make it mad. The Nukacade will be part of Nuka World On Tour, and you'll be able to play Bandit Roundup, Nuka Zapper Racer and Whack-A-Commie, as well as new for this event, the Bottle Blaster game, which Bethesda promises will test your might. Those Nukacade points promise you exciting prizes, so be sure to check that out. And lastly, although not tied to the event, a long-missed feature from Fallout 4 settlements is coming to Fallout 76's camps. FreeCam allows you to finally separate the camera from your character, so no more standing in odd places or building support structures to reach the top of your creations in order to finish them off. Just a heads up, however, the public test server will be operating differently this time. After 1 week of uptime, the public test server will be taken offline for a week, and then it will be back for a week, and it will keep repeating this cycle to allow for more development time to review feedback, fix bugs, and make other adjustments. So if you're interested in checking this content out early, make sure you check your calendar first to avoid disappointment. Moving now to other official events, this month is of course the 25th anniversary of Fallout, celebrating the initial release by Interplay Entertainment in 1997. If you know someone who hasn't tried Fallout 76 before, you can get a free code from Amazon as part of your Prime Gaming benefits, or play for free until October 11. From October 11 through 17, you'll be able to try Select Fallout First, the paid subscription service, benefits for free. Those selected benefits include the scrap box, the score boost, and the survival tent. You'll find all of that in the Atomic Shop. First you unlock the preview, and then for those of you who are looking for the scrap box, you'll find that in the Fallout First specific page. That survival tent will be perfect for the Invaders from Beyond event, which is running now until October 18. After that, the Spooky Scorched event comes online for Halloween between October 25 and November 8. There are more announcements to come. You can either check up with us on the wiki, or if you're looking for the official site, you'll find that at fallout25th.com. They promise an update on the official site every Monday. For those not playing Fallout 76, you'll find discounts on select Creation Club items, and Bethesda is promising discounts on other titles. Be sure to check your online game store of choice for more details. Moving now to staffing news, Steve Massey is the second prominent Bethesda developer to leave the studio this year, following Jeff Gardner leaving the project lead spot back in June. Massey worked as a senior level developer at the Austin branch of the studio, which was purely focused on Fallout 76. Although there have been some speculation that this may suggest that there is some trouble at the studio, Massey released a statement on the Datamining Discord attempting to dispel such fears, saying that his departure was on good terms and that he'd left to work on an indie project. We'll be sure to let you know what that is as more news breaks. Pete Hines, as you may know as the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Communications, has been promoted. Mr. Hines will be taking on the role of Global Head of Publishing. Aaron Nossi, the non-senior VP of Global Marketing and Communications, will be taking on the role he departs. Mr. Hines has been with Bethesda since 1999, starting as a PR team member for Fallout projects, and Ms. Losi started in 2005 as a Senior Manager of PR and Marketing. We've had a few drips of Fallout casting. Here's a complete list of what we know so far. Walter Goggins, Ella Pernelli, Carl McLaughlin, Zila Mercedes-Jones, Michael John Benzea, and Michael Emerson are all listed on IMDb playing unknown characters. Aaron Moten is listed as playing Maximus, Charlie Besso is playing Tommy, Mason Kufari plays Birthday Boy Roy, Neil Town plays Alpha Leader, Jace Wade plays a Raider Leader, confirming that there is some sort of raiding faction, and Victoria Danilo Petroscava plays a character just known as Wife. Another actor, Russell Ewing, also lists Fallout on his resume, but he is not listed on IMDb. Moving now to fan news. There's a lot of Fallout fan events going on for the anniversary arranged by the creators involved with the Fallout for Hope project. Ken and Oxhorn will be hosting a retrospective panel with Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky. That's on October 10 at 6 p.m. US Eastern, or 3 p.m. for those US Pacific, 11 p.m. in London. All over the US, there will be cosplay events arranged by the crew, including in Sutton, West Virginia at the Flatwoods Monster Museum on the 22nd. Those out west can instead join with Easy Pete at Good Springs, Nevada on the same day. The next day you have the choice between Washington, D.C. with Wes Johnson at the Lincoln Memorial, or at Boston with Chris Cuella at the Freedom Trail. Some of these events are limited in numbers, so be sure to RSVP. You can find out more at falloutforhope.com. Coming up on the 15th of October, the Wasteland Theatre Company will be streaming A Midsummer's Night's Dream. Ray and Lucy from the 5-0 Responders will be talking more about this later in the broadcast, and Northern Harvest from the company talks more about that last month. The stream will be raising funds for Fallout for Hope, which benefits the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. Once Upon a Wasteland Season 2 premieres on October 17, taking us back to Fort Atlas with Senior Scribe Valdez. Find them on all good podcast players, or find their link tree on their Twitter bio at OnceUpon76pod. And turning to Wiki News, we'll have our own Fallout Day interview with Tim Kay, Jason Taylor and Leonard Boyarsky, who'll be answering your questions, and we've had an excellent response from you getting those questions. Keep following us on Twitter at Nukapedia for updates to find out on how your question is going to be answered. Our very own Layman's Reign is running for Content Moderator. Join us on the forums to have your say on this vote before October 12. This is your Nukapedia Network news. If you have an upcoming event you want us to talk about, or if you have some Fallout news tips, you can tweet us at Nukapedia or email us at nukafalloutwiki@gmail.com. Coming up next, Fallout history and the bloody truth behind the foundation of the Brotherhood of Steel, as told by Maxson himself.
Wastelanders and Appalachians, we are extremely honored to announce that our next play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, will be streamed live for the Fallout for Hope charity drive to benefit St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We sincerely hope that you will tune in and donate generously to benefit this great cause. So mark your calendars for October 15th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, live only on twitter.tv/FalloutFIVE0. Thank you.
It's the 10th of October, 2077, 2 weeks before the Great War, and Roger Maxson, captain of the U.S. Army Security Detachment at the Mariposa Military Base in California, sat at a terminal to record his thoughts.
I have started this log because it doesn't look good for any of us, and I'd like for people to know what really happened here. All hell broke loose when we finally discovered what those scientist bastards were up to. The colonel has locked himself in his office and seems to be having some sort of breakdown. The men are screaming for blood. They're looking to me for answers, and I'm not sure what to do. Someone has to do something, though, before this place sinks into an anarchistic bloodbath.
The captain's discovery would set him and his troops on a course that would shape events across America, and in its fire would forge a new band of brothers, with a new purpose. This is Fallout History, where we explore the stories behind some of the biggest events in Fallout history. I'm Layman's Reign, and this month we explore the foundation of the Brotherhood of Steel. It's a week later. The bloodbath Maxson has prophesied has come to pass. The blood, however, is on the captain's hands. Again, he tells his journal.
I killed a man today. I was interrogating Chief Scientist Anderson, and he was giving me the full details of their inhuman experiments. He said his orders came from the government, but I didn't buy it. He started screaming about how he was following orders, how he was a military man, and I just shot him. I tell myself it was to keep him from causing a full mutiny among the men, and I'm not so sure. I tried again to speak to the colonel through the door, but he seems to have completely lost touch with reality. I broke the door down with several of the men just in time to watch him blow his head off. Right before he pulled the trigger, he said he was sorry. By killing the egghead, I seem to have confirmed my position as leader of the men. They follow me without question now. The interrogations invariably end up being executions. Shellman held out the longest, but the end result was the same. Her arguments about her orders were a bit too specific to be completely made up. I'm getting a real bad feeling in my gut about how this is all going to end up. I don't even lie to myself anymore about my reasons for executing the scientists.
But what could possibly be so serious that it would turn a U.S. captain to cold-blooded murder? The answer? Human experimentation of the forced evolutionary virus. A project once intended to protect humanity from disease, instead reformulated to turn people into super soldiers. These volunteers, if they were volunteers at all, would be transformed into abject horrors, yet their creators, those performing the experiments, would justify their actions as merely following orders from those above them. But killing the scientists would not be enough. What of those who gave the orders?
I finally replied to the outside world over our radio. I don't know why they never sent anyone here to see what was happening when we stopped responding to their transmissions. It doesn't make any sense. Well, they'll come now. I declared ourselves seceded from the Union. They remember Jefferson Davis. What will history say about me?
Maxson expected a swift response to their declaration. They were, after all, a U.S. military unit. Instead, he received silence for 3 whole days. Then, the Great War began.
I can't believe those bastards finally did it. Damn them all to hell. They finally let the A-bombs fly. We were right in the middle of trying to pry the real story out of von Felden when we completely lost contact. I have a feeling the research center was hit hard. I don't know why, just call it a gut feeling. It seems inconceivable that we were not targeted. I'm sure China will make up for that oversight real soon. Luckily, we had moved our families from outside into the facility the day before yesterday. We do not yet know if the fallout has reached this area.
Fallout levels would remain low, and out of fear the facility may be targeted in the future, the decision was made to leave Mariposa for the Lost Hills bunker to the south. Although initially planning to set out on October 25th, they would not actually leave until October 27th. The Brotherhood would remember this event as the Exodus, a time of sadness, but also a time of hope.
The exodus from the accursed base was a trying time for the men and their families. Whilst there was no radioactive fallout to contend with, they were frequently beset by the fallout of humanity. Roving bands of psychotic marauders attempted several attacks on that noble group. The company itself was in no danger, for they wore the armour of power. Members of their family were not so lucky. Once the vermin found that they were easily repelled, they began to fire on the unarmed civilians from a distance. They took a great many casualties, yet for every member of the Exodus that was struck down in this way, our noble brethren took 2 lives from the wasteland. Finally, our forefathers came to the safety of the bunker. Captain Maxson, the great deliverer, decreed this to be our new home, and all was well.
But moving was not enough. They needed a purpose. So Maxson set to give them and other surviving military units that purpose.
What we need is purpose, but we cannot look to the America of old for that purpose. We have to build our own. So tonight, as we break bread together, let us forge together something new, something strong, something we can be proud of, something we can build upon. We'll preserve what's best of what's come before and use it. And one day, we will reclaim what was lost. Let us forge a Brotherhood of Steel.
Maxson's hopes in this brotherhood would endure for centuries, but they all began with an act of rebellion that led to the foundation of the Brotherhood. An act of rebellion that took place in the shadow of war in October 2077.
Here we are, son, our nation's capital.
In 1997, we stepped out into the wasteland for the first time. On October 23rd, 2022, we'll gather once again to celebrate 25 years of Fallout. Join us as we strap on our Pitt boys and travel to the capital wasteland of Washington, D.C. for what promises to be an epic cosplay event to support the 2022 Fallout for Hope charity drive for St. Jude Children's Hospital. Our adventure begins at the Lincoln Memorial for a 1 p.m. Eastern Standard start time, where we'll feature none other than Wes Johnson, Shiragorath himself, as the Master of Ceremonies. Imagine that.
Wonderful! Time for a celebration!
We'll take group photos, selfies, you know I love those, and even videos to share on social media to raise awareness and gather donations to help the cause. We'll then parade down the National Mall to the Washington Monument, where we'll be giving away prizes donated by Bethesda for Best Costume. And who knows, there may be a few surprise guests along the way. I'm not saying anything though. Once we wrap up festivities, feel free to take a wander through the National Mall. You never know what you might find in the Natural History Museum. I'm just saying. Check it out. Well, I guess that's it. So join us October 23rd, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, at the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. on the National Mall. Come and cosplay or not, meet some awesome folks, and celebrate 25 years of Fallout. But most importantly, help us raise awareness and funds for St. Jude Children's Hospital.
And now on Publick Occurances, I'm talking to Ray and Lucy, the founders of the 50 Responders. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Yeah, doing well. Thank you.
I'll have to
Great.
excuse us operating on 2 conversations. We interrupt each other constantly. It's part of our shtick.
Well, that's absolutely fine. So before I get to my first question, I just want to address the wee elephant in the room. Where might we have heard your voice before, Lucy?
I am on the Modus Files, where I play Lilith, and I am on Once Upon a Wasteland, where I play Amanda Otis, and I'm also on the Chad podcast, like Ray is as well, where I play Corey Anders, one of the responders in the podcast, as well as Old Lady Simpson.
It sounds like you both have a bit more experience than I do then. What about you, Ray? Do we hear you anywhere else?
Chad, the Fallout 76 podcast, is really where we both got our start. I voice Commander Johns there. I also, in our personal group, do Commander Johns and Dutch Walker. I've done some small voices for Uranium Fever, just some add-on characters there. Nothing long term. I think, I've done something for Modus File, again, just filler spots. So I'm not quite the same level of voice dynamics as Lucy is, that's for sure. But it's been fun. It's been fun.
Certainly sounds like fun. And those are all fantastic shows there. Make sure that you check them out after
they really
listening
are.
to this if you haven't already. So the first real question I like to ask everyone is, what was your first Fallout moment?
I didn't get introduced to Fallout until Fallout 3. And I was like, hey, you should try this game. And I was like, all right. And I fell in love with it. I think because it was so close to home, given its location, we live in the same area where Fallout 3 takes place. So for us, at least for me, it was just kind of an interesting personal experience. And so that's kind of where I got introduced into Fallout. So Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and then 76. I have a confession that I have not played New Vegas. Although I have watched people play it. So I'm kind of like, I've watched people play it, so I'm not going to play it.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's a shame. I got a start on Fallout with the original Fallout back in 97. I was in college, and I really hadn't done much gaming since the late 80s and Super Nintendo, but my buddy had a pretty nice computer system at the time, and we were roommates, and he started playing it, and I was looking over his shoulder, and I'm like, what in the world is this? I think for me, the allure of Fallout, the first one and the series thereafter, is that one in particular was so non-linear, and games up to that point were really, kind of a check and go, sort of go here, go there, but that one was just such a visceral, wide open experience, and the storytelling. And at the time, just the game style, kind of over the top, looking down, and it was a captivating story and a captivating game at the time. But I would say, at moment we all walk out of the vault and Fallout 3, I think that is the one that cemented the love for that. But my favorite is Vegas by far. I like the hyper loneliness feel to that one, but also just the genre of the 1950s Vegas style feel. And really all of the survivability factor in that game was very appealing. So having to upgrade and upkeep your weapons and things like that.
That's a really interesting contrast between the two of you there.
Yeah, it's just a story to tell.
Yeah.
The funny thing is she is really the role player, like if I had to look back on our experiences and the way Fallout is sort of that role play experience or that type of gaming. I mean, Lucy has a lot of experience with MMOs and things like that. I'm sure she can talk to you about, but yeah, it is a funny dynamic. I seem to get into these games and then pull her in that direction, and then she just, boom, it explodes and she goes gung-ho.
That's amazing. So I've been following your social media for a little while now, and I can see you do both role plays as well as make your own in-game movies. How exactly does that work? Do you role play the same characters in the films and have extras fill other parts, or do you double up on roles, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's quite a production, that's for sure. It really starts with Lucy. She has the formula.
So usually I have a story arc in mind with X amount of chapters or stages, and I kind of outline it out, and some of it requires in-game RP where our characters in the group that we play with, they all have choices to make and face certain obstacles, and the results of those interactions end up actually fueling the next chapter, what happens next. So every encounter, every role play that we have set up, one of these official ones, has rewards and consequences. So based off of their choices that they make, it's just exactly like kind of like DMing an event. It fuels where I take the next chapter in a more specific direction. And then I will go to Ray and I'll say, this is the story arc. This is what we're doing. This is how it ties to our lore or how it ties to, another group or whatever it might be. Can you help me kind of put this to a visual? And that's where the Machinima comes in. And so he'll say, okay, let's sit down and look at the planning for this. Let's storyboard it out. What are the key factors? What are the angles I need? And so it's a process that we do together. We spend time at our kitchen bar often talking about the staging and what we would want to see the end product kind of look like in order to tell the story. when it comes to the larger machinima, he and I will discuss kind of the story, the overarching story, like our big machinima pieces, the ones that are almost an hour in length. And I'll create the script, I'll write it out, it'll go through several revisions and edits, and then I punt it to him, and then he sits down and he starts to storyboard it. And many of our players are the characters that you see in the machinima. So our characters also appear in the machinima stories that we're telling. And sometimes they do double up. Sometimes we play multiple characters, but we try to keep it as limited to one identifiable character at a time. So just because I might change the clothes or the look of one of my characters in the game, you will only see me playing one specific character and voicing that one specific character in the machinima. It just makes it easier that way. So that's how we end up with a cast of over 40 people, and that's just voice actors. That doesn't even mean the amount of bodies that we actually move around.
That is our current situation, but the background from how it all started really was our interactions in game, like Lucy was saying. And we started to feel like we wanted to have a summary of the events and tell the story in a little bit more of a cinematic way. And that's how the machinima sort of came to play. It was more like the lore building. So, you know, when you play a video game, you have that entry story that you watch before you hit start, when it kind of pulls you into the world you're about to play in. That's what the videos do. This is the general story that's going to be happening and introduce the characters. If we had to sum it up, it's basically a podcast with visuals, of course, but it's happening real time as well. So our characters, when they become part of our group, they take on the role of their character, both in the game and in written RP. And then the big story, like Lucy was saying, the big story arcs and their interactions within it, we try to document or summarize what's happening. So it became more for our community, just to have that fun visual. But then it did start to appeal to the outside community. And that's where we have morphed to this point, a hybrid of role play with storytelling.
You mentioned outside community there. A few weeks ago, we spoke to the Wasteland Theatre Company, who mentioned that you've been helping them with setting up shows. What other groups is it you're working with, and how is it all?
The theater company is our first long-term, I call it production, where we're sort of in the background helping to bring that content to the masses. But in the past, we have worked with many factions to tell our grander story. So for example, the Trial of the Warlord is it is our biggest story arc for the last 3.5 years. It has involved many outside factions representing Enclave and Raiders and BOS. So those groups we have brought into the mix, and they help us tell the stories as well. But the theater company, that's our first foray into really helping another group bring their material to a larger audience. I don't know if Lucy has anything to add to that.
I would just say that because we've been around since the beginning, we do have several long-term relationships with different groups, different people through the game. And anytime we're taking a story in a particular direction, we invite people to kind of think about what's realistic, what's their story, because we want to also help tell the stories of other people. So when it comes to some of our machinima, it isn't always just the giant big movie production. Sometimes it really is just let us help you tell your story. And we've done these little shorts, these machina lore is what we call them, these little shorts where they focus in on a character or a section of the community. And then we take that even further with the responders undercover, where we interview particular groups in the PlayStation community and talk about what they were doing and how they were playing the game and enjoying the game, whether they were uranium fever or virtual photography. We kind of focused on spending time interviewing them and discussing also how they were working.
That's part of the streaming is something last year that we have really playing with. I wouldn't call us weekly streamers by any stretch. We've always visualized ourselves as more of a studio. So when it comes to streaming, we definitely are reaching out to other communities. And I hope anyone that's listening to this, if you have an RP community or an interesting role play style story to tell, we are looking to promote those groups. One of the things that we are looking to do over the next year is utilize, like Lucy was saying, Responders Undercover, which is where we interview outside groups to learn their stories, their lore, their role play in particular, not like builds and things like that.
It sounds like what you're doing requires a lot of work. What process do you go through with these projects? How long do they take to develop, and what tools are you using to do it?
So if we're breaking our group down into 3 zones, we have our roleplay community and our just in-game community. That's our Fallout 5.0 faction. And then the Fallout production side, focusing more on our content creation, streaming, machinima. And then we have sort of our Discord side, which is storytelling only in writing generally. I'll speak on the content creation part. So Fallout Productions, that definitely, it's a process. I'm not a professional TV director, so I kind of call it guerrilla machinima or guerrilla production. You know, it's kind of duct taped together, but it starts with the fundamental idea, and whether it's interviewing another community or it's telling a machinima, it really just starts with, can we give the information to the audience as pure as possible? So one of the things I admire about the 76 Theater, for example, is when we started working with them, they were very much, Northern in particular, Northern Harvest was very much against a lot of flashy streaming, you know, didn't want tons of overlays. We just wanted to deliver the content. And that's, I think, something we relate to as well. So when we sit down to plan things out, it always starts with just how do we deliver this great story to the audience without distracting them and diluting it with a lot of other stuff. So the planning process, it just starts there, and then it expands into only the necessities. What information do we need to deliver? So from the machinima standpoint, we always take the story that either Lucy has written or that the community has formed in our role play, and then we storyboard it out. Literally, I will spend, probably an enormous amount of hours that I don't need to do if you speak to other machinima artists. But I like to see the story on a storyboard first. So I will write out the angles, the dialogue that is next to it, what I'm trying to relay, and the emotion. Fallout is not exactly a play. It is a great machinima place, but when you don't have moving mouths and things like that, it's very difficult to get emotion and expression. And so we have to take time to learn what emojis and camera mode, facial expressions and poses. So it takes a lot of time just to do that part of it. And then, as you know, the editing process when we're talking about machinima, it's not just putting together the pieces of the video, but it's also sound editing. It's voiceover work. You have to get the actors to send in their lines. You're piecing and placing the lines and pacing and background music. And so it becomes a real production. So from a production side, it's everything you might imagine it to be. So, Lucy, what about the community side of things?
So, where do I begin? On Discord, there is a lot of writing that happens. Sometimes it is unplanned sort of experiences where a writer will set up a scene or a situation with their character and just run with it and see who jumps on it. And other times, I will, or one of my established other writers will set up a large event on the Discord where people have an opportunity to play through in text roleplay the events. And so in order to get that to happen, there is some backward planning that obviously needs to occur ahead of time. So I spend some time in the game and in different resources trying to establish locations or specific static things in the game that can serve a purpose. For example, if I'm doing an event where I need the people to travel from one place to another, I need to be able to have reference points in the game that make sense. And that can be for either text RP or in the game RP. So I spend a lot of time in the game actually running around the map and trying to find areas that aren't necessarily listed or objects that are static and not going to disappear from somebody picking it up or whatever. And I use those, and those become these assets that we then incorporate. So some of the planning time is spent in that. When it comes to writing the scripts, the screenplays for the different pieces that he ends up filming, it depends on the subject matter and whether it's a long chapter or it's just a machinima short, like something very small that I can whip out in a day. But the process does involve looking at the game, looking at the assets in the game, what's realistic, what I can use to my advantage to help tell the story, the environment, or even NPCs in the game, and then getting it down on paper in some fashion and having it go through a revision process. Because I'm not a screenwriter by trade. I am more of a narrative writer, and so I really had to learn over the years how to rethink writing in terms of storytelling when it comes to the movie format. You can't have long, drawn-out speeches, and you're limited by, like what Ray said, characters not being able to have their mouths move. So I really had to rely on how much information I could deliver in short bursts of dialogue, or save the longer pieces for text-based writing back and forth with the community in order to facilitate their movement through a particular narrative arc.
To summarize so that it makes a little more sense, the whole process starts in the community. So we start with writing generally. This is going on in the game on the Discord. And then we take what storytelling is happening in the Discord and we take it into the game world. And then players will interact knowing sort of the background story that has been written, and they will go in and they will play out the rest of the story. Take what they play out, we bring it into screenwriting, and we take what they do and we make it screenable, and then we will film the major story portions of that and turn it into Machinima lore and then put it out. So that's how it works. We write it, they go in, they play it, we take their results from their playing, we turn it into a Machinima lore, and then put it out as a story. Those are the basic steps that happen. Now, in between that, there's a million other little things, but those are the four primaries: story, gameplay, screenplay, and Machinima.
It sounds almost like a full-time job. When you've been running around,
You have no idea. Yeah.
when you've been running around the map, have there been any particular finds that you've been particularly surprised to find? And do you use any particular tools to find them?
I think the holotapes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off. Exactly what she just said. The holotapes. Absolutely. There's so much story in this game, and so many points of reference that can be used to tell more stories. Go ahead, Lucy. Didn't mean to cut you.
No, that's fine. I spent a lot of time trying to listen to holotapes that are in really obscure places, caves, trailers, wherever you find them, to get an idea of what happened there. And same thing with the terminals, just spending time reading some of the terminal entries, and you're like, hey, this is a story that they just wrote for like a little drop for somebody that's reading the terminal, but we could do something with this. We could take this and actually tell the story of what happened here that led up to this point. So I don't know if I've necessarily been... Go ahead.
As I was going to say, it's an amazing thing to find those, because a lot of times they have trail story as well. So if you look at the base that you just read or heard, and then you can actually find other portions of that story too. So it's just such depth in the game where that's concerned. Go ahead.
I think also I'm never really surprised so much by things that I've found in the game, more just like, wow, that's kind of neat to find that. I find them interesting, and a little bit of, the Easter eggs. I think their connection to pop culture is always funny when I see that happen. Like the Tea Party, for example, the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. I kind of giggle every time I stumble across that again and again and again in the world, because it's just funny and very kind of a nod to the bigger picture of the world that was left behind, and some of the pop culture references. But when in doubt, I also Google things. I Google foo things and try to figure out, where is that one place where the weird mysterious pillars are? And then to actually find those mysterious pillars. And then I had no idea they were actually real somewhere down south in Georgia, I think. So they're actually real pillars, except they just got torn down apparently over the summer. But that's, I guess, the closest thing to a surprise, was that these mysterious pillars that appear in 76 are actual real things down the south.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot to find there. But if there's just one piece of advice you could give an aspiring Fallout content creator, what would it be?
I got to work through which one.
One piece of advice: whatever you want to create, make sure it's something that you're interested in and not what you think other people would be interested in. Because otherwise then it becomes a job, and you want whatever you're creating to be something that you have a passion for. So make it something that you have a connection to, but also understand that it does take time. It does take patience, and you have to be willing to accept that there will be some sacrifice of time in order to create whatever it is that you're trying to create. And that can be somewhat difficult for people when they kind of realize the amount of time it may take to bring to fruition whatever their vision might be.
I certainly hear you there. If you're out there and you haven't tried this, however long you think it takes to edit something, you're wrong.
Yeah, I want to echo exactly what Lucy said, and that is create for you and your people, the group, or if it's just you, just create content you want to create. We've never been trying to market our material. It was never about that. We love it if people enjoy the storytelling and the machinima. But I'm sure you've edited something and you think it's brilliant and then it falls flat, or you're just like, wow, why isn't there more views, or why aren't there more listens? But the reality is, if you enjoy what you're creating, that is the most important part. And don't get caught up in whether or not others are liking the material. It's something you're doing for you. They say, especially in the machinima world, create machinima that appeals to the fan base that you are making the machinima in. And I will say, over the years, we've done exactly the opposite of that. So we're telling our character stories, and if you're not part of our community, you probably aren't really invested in those characters, but we are. And so that's what makes it fun, and that's why we still continue to do it. And it's because it means something to us. So create something that means something to you, and you'll eventually find your people that enjoy it.
Great.
You're right,
Now,
though. The editing process is hellish.
So we're recording this at the start of October 2022, and I understand you're both working on something special at the moment. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few things. I'll throw out right away the 25th anniversary Fallout cosplay. I can't speak enough about how awesome these events are going to be over 4 cities. We have Vegas and West Virginia, Austin, and we are hosting in DC. And it was put together for the Fallout for Hope to benefit St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And so not only is it an amazing celebration of a game we've all loved for a generation, but it's an amazing opportunity to provide some charitable support to that organization. And definitely want to shout out Kenny over at Chad Fallout 76, who really, he is Fallout for Hope in that group. And yeah, they have done such amazing work over the years to take this game that we all love to make it something more than just a game. So that's the biggest thing happening in October. Lucy, you want to mention the theater production too? That's going to be epic for Fallout.
Yeah, we have the theater production on October 15th. We're doing A Midsummer Night's Dream, and we'll be performing that in the game live, and we'll be streaming that. And that will be at 7 p.m. Eastern on the 15th.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm playing a character in it. One of my favorite characters, actually. I'm playing Nick Bottom. I adore that character.
Yeah, the play is just, I can't say enough about that. I just really want to shout that out too, because you can almost smell the high school theater, you know what I mean? Like, so when you're watching it, or as I'm streaming it and I'm just watching it, it just feels very real. It's a very real play, you know? So the dynamic there with the game being utilized for that's amazing. So I hope everyone will definitely tune into that. We are also streaming that for Fallout for Hope. So if you want to give whatever you can spare to help and tune into that. That's on twitch.tv Fallout50. So that's FIVE0. Number 0 on Twitch.
That's really great to hear that you're part of that. We've been excited for it since we spoke to Northern Harvest last month there. What platforms are you on? How big is your group at the moment?
We started on PlayStation. We're heavily entrenched on PlayStation, but we have also started to develop our community also on the Xbox side. We're not PC players.
Yeah, we can only do 2 at a time. Okay. Yeah, so Xbox is our newest.
Great. And now moving to the social media, what are the best ways to follow up what you're doing and connect with you?
The central source would just be Fallout50, so FalloutFIVE0.com. That has all of our socials listed, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I really haven't figured out TikTok yet. I'm a little probably...
we'll stay away from TikTok.
Right, and YouTube, that's where we post most of our longer videos. Twitter is where we will have our shorts generally. Instagram, again, still figuring that out. And Facebook was where we started. Connecting is all easy from one source, and that's Fallout50.com.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to seeing more releases from you, as well as watching along with Midsummer Night's Dream there in a couple of weeks.
Very appreciative of you having us on.
Thank you for
very
having
much.
us. Yes, really appreciate it.
Yeah, really
Not a
enjoying the
problem.
shows that you're putting out as well. So keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
This episode of Junk Radio is sponsored in part by the Brass Lantern. The Brass Lantern, best food in Megaton. And don't let Moriarty tell you different.
Filling a wiki full of information is a daunting task, but you might be wondering where we get all that information from. A large part of that, especially for Fallout 76, is in data mining. But what exactly is data mining? I'm joined in this series by Wafflecop, who's one of our data miners. Waffle, it's great for you to be with us.
Yeah, no problem. It's nice to be here.
Great. So when I took a break from the community a few years ago, data mining wasn't really a high-profile thing. So can you tell us exactly what it is?
So at the top level, data mining is just analyzing the information that is stored in the game's files. How you go about it is really based on the end goal or what type of files you're dealing with, but all of the data is there in the files for the game, and it's just a matter of obtaining and formatting it in a nice, pretty way.
So it sounds like something that's clearly very important for those of us who are building wikis. What's one of the more impressive finds that you've been involved in?
Back when the Nuka-Cola Quantum Power Armor had come out, we knew that there was secrets in it's the bunkers, and I don't remember the name of the bunkers, but there was secrets regarding them, but we didn't really know what they were. And so I was able to use data mining to figure out the secret and solve the puzzle for that quantum power armor. I was not actually the first one to do it. There was a guy on Reddit who had commented saying that he figured it out, but he didn't give any other information than that. Like, he had a picture that he had found it, and that was it. So I was the second person. I spent all night making a video to get it out there, which a lot of people didn't like, actually. They were like, you ruined it. We're supposed to figure this out with, actually figure it out. But instead, I just looked up the locations of things using data mining.
Oh, at the end of the day, you can either choose to read those sort of things, or you can choose to go and explore the thing yourself. No one's forcing you to actually read the walkthrough, I guess.
Yeah, I started putting spoilers for stuff, with like that kind of stuff afterwards. But prior to that, I had not been. So it's understandable a little bit.
Fair enough. So I want to talk about some of the tools that you use. We'll talk about them sort of in broad detail this time, and we'll explore them a bit more in the future. But when I go looking in our Discord, I see links into something called Nukapedia, and I also hear them talking about something called Xedit. What do these do, and what can we learn from them?
So I'm going to start by breaking down the target of those tools, because they both are looking at the same file, the same information. So that file is called the ESM file, and it follows a basic format. It has groups, and a group is a record type that stores a list of other groups or records, but never both at the same time. So it'll either be a group of groups or a group of records. It's never going to be both. And then you have a record, which is just an individual data structure that has fields that will store information relevant to the record. So like a weapon will have a damage field or a level field, that kind of stuff. It's not going to be irrelevant to the type of record. Currently, I believe there's about 170 different record types, ranging from weapons to quest text to dialogue, just all the data in the game. There's 170 of them. Xedit is a tool that will display that data in a human readable way, because if you just open it up, you're not going to be able to parse any relevant information out of that. So Xedit will just let us see that in a way that we can understand, and it also allows us to run scripts to export that data, which is super useful. Nukapedia is basically Xedit Lite. It's just a search and display for records. It doesn't have anything super fancy, you can't run scripts, and it's entirely reliant on Xedit anyway. It's just a quicker way to access it, so you don't have to load up a whole program on your PC, go and find stuff. It's just all there in a web browser.
What about the various media, like the images and models and things like that? How do you access those?
So those are stored in a separate file, and it's basically just a file archive that was designed by Bethesda, kind of similar to a zip file or a tar archive. And there are a couple tools out there that you can use to search or extract files from the BA2 archives. I personally use Bethesda Archive Extractor, because it's got a command line interface as well as a graphical interface. These archives store all of the game's data that is not just a data structure. So that is textures, audio, images, models, like I said, anything that's not just raw data structures. Depending on what files you're dealing with, you're going to need different tools. For images and textures, they use a file called a .dds file, and we've found that paint.net is probably the best one for that because it's just plug and play. You install paint.net, you can open those files. There's two other tools. You can use GIMP or Photoshop, but those both require an add-on to be installed to open the .dds files. So a little bit more work there, but in my opinion, I like GIMP because it has all the features of Photoshop, but it's free and open source. If you want to open 3D models, there's a tool that was written and it's called NifScope. Currently, it's not actually written to be used with Fallout 76. However, Xera updated that so that it does work with Fallout 76. You just have to download a very specific branch from GitHub because otherwise it won't work. And that lets us view all the 3D models as well as you can actually retexture them. You can't save it back to the game, but you can preview it. So you can say, oh, I want to view this object with this texture, and it'll at the very least let you see it. Audio files, there's a couple different formats. Most of them are standard, but there's one non-standard one called a .fuzz format, and I believe that's used for a lot of the dialogue in the game, so conversations from NPCs, that kind of stuff. There's a program called Unfuzzer, which will just convert that to a standard format that you can use in any other program.
So I've heard with the animations that they're using Flash, but I remember there being a big deal about Flash being removed from websites. What are these games using Flash for, and is it safe?
So you are correct. Flash is being used for the animations, a lot of the small stuff on the UI, as far as like when your player gets crippled or a perk animation pops up. Those are all Flash files. I'm pretty sure at this point that it's going to be secure. The reason Flash was insecure in the web browser was because you were downloading Flash files from whatever website, and there was a lot of websites that would be malicious, like they would use Flash in a malicious way. They would try and patch the security holes, but Flash was an ancient technology. You know, it's like Internet Explorer. There's only so many band-aids you can apply before it's just not worth maintaining anymore. And so they made that decision to just cut it. So at this point, Flash is packaged with the game, and I believe it's a limited version of Flash, so it's not got that web accessibility or anything like that, and it's only loading Flash files that are provided locally by Bethesda. You're in a pretty safe spot there. And then to actually open those files, you want to use JPEGSys Flash decompiler, which will allow you to open, view, and export all of those animations, because there's no other really standard tool for Flash unless you want to pay for it, and Flash licensing is a nightmare. So this is the free version.
Thanks for joining us for this tech talk there, Wafflecop. Hopefully we'll have you on again so we can talk more about these tools in a bit more detail.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fallout Creature Feature, where we take a look at some of the most notable animals, monsters, and strange beings that inhabit the wasteland. I'm LS, and today, in tribute to our wonderful guests from the Fallout 5.0, we're going to cover the creatures that their members will encounter whenever they engage in a mission in their Pitt patrols. The one and only Trogs, one of the Fallout monsters that creep me out the most. Trogs are the most common monsters that denizens of the Pit and outside adventurers encounter in the ruins of Pittsburgh. The poor souls who morph into Trogs are infected with what Dr. Sandra Kundanica calls the Troglodyte Degeneration Contagion, or TDC. TDC is the result of continuous radiation exposure combined with the toxic wastes and pollutions that contaminate the region of the Pit. This combination of radiation and exposure to industrial waste results in creatures unique to the area around Pittsburgh. After a few weeks of exposure, the victim first experiences lesions in the skin and a degeneration of brain chemistry, eventually turning into the violent wild men. This is the fate for most people who experience this prolonged exposure, but for about 20% of those infected, the degeneration continues. They lose their higher reasoning and motor skills, eventually turning feral and seeing everything, even former loved ones and acquaintances, as prey. Even though adults have a small chance of going completely feral, children born within the regions where TDC infection occurs are practically guaranteed to turn entirely feral only weeks after being born, due to the contamination rate. When fully morphed, Trogs are only capable of uttering short words or phrases, such as meat or kill it. Even though they aren't particularly strong individually, Trogs swarm their prey in packs, and this is where their danger comes from. They prefer dark areas of the pit, not wanting to go out into areas that have a lot of light. The Trogs are a terrible danger for any wasteland wanderer or member of the 5-0 going on a Pittsburgh patrol mission. If you ever go on a patrol mission to the pit, make sure you don't go alone, because you never know in what dark corner these terrible monstrosities will be lurking. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fallout Creature Feature. For JunkRadio, I'm LS.
Have you thought about making Fallout content? Come and give it a try. JunkRadio is an open access podcast, and that means you can be a part of it. Maybe you want to talk about some of the places and people in Fallout, or maybe you have an idea for an audio drama. If you have a face for radio, please get in touch on Twitter at Nukapedia, on our Discord, through the wiki at fallout.fandom.com, or via our email at nukafalloutwiki@gmail.com. Coming up on the Mod Squad, I talked to Ash and Wallaby from Fallout Ashfall, who are taking Fallout to somewhere it's never been before, Hawaii. This is Agency here from the future. Ash and Wallaby are so passionate about their project that there was just more that we could put into this broadcast. So the good news is, towards the end of this month, we'll be releasing an extended version of this interview. But for now, please do enjoy this chat with Ash and Wallaby from Fallout Ashfall. Thanks for joining me, fellas.
Hello.
So I like to start interviews by asking both of you what your first Fallout moment was.
I was initially introduced to the Fallout franchise through Fallout 4's release trailer. However, my first Fallout game was Fallout New Vegas. I mainly played it because it was a spin-off, and I came to the assumption that because it was a spin-off, I wouldn't need context from the Fallouts 1 through 3 to just play it. I could just play it on its own without having to worry about the other games, and in a sense, I was right. But from there, it just sort of spiraled out of control. I became very obsessed with the Fallout franchise.
For me, I'm a little bit older. I'm in my mid-30s, and so my first Fallout experience was when my older brother brought home Fallout, a post-apocalyptic role-playing game. And we were like, what is this game? I would watch him play it, and a very fond memory, one day when I was shutting off the computer and my brother had extracted one of the audio files from when you're, what's the name of that paladin? Or no, it's the Enclave guy. And
Sergeant Glenn.
What the fuck are you talking about? It's the president of the fucking United States. Who the fuck? Like, I shut off the computer one day, and that started shouting at me at the computer. I'm like, what? And then my brother comes around the corner. Oh, yeah, that's from Fallout 2. I haven't shown it to you yet. Like, that was my exposure, was the initial one. And I tried playing it back then, and, like, I didn't really get it. So I really just watched my brother. The first Fallout that I actually was immersed in was Fallout 3. And I just remember, because I was in the Army at the time, and I remember coming downstairs, and there's a guy, he was on duty. His friend had brought down his Xbox to show him Fallout 3 that just came out the day before. And I was like, what, there's a new Fallout game? And I didn't know they were still making Fallout games. And so I got it, and I'm back in ever since.
Big question then, why Hawaii? What is it about the islands that appeals to you?
I think when it comes to Hawaii as a location, you have a lot of opportunity to explore a sort of alternate version of the Fallout world where settlements can develop and thrive without worrying about these sort of existential threats like the Master or the Enclave. You basically get to see into a version of Fallout that has basically been untouched by the wider conflicts of the Wasteland. And I think that's a very fascinating kind of world to look into. And additionally, I also think that given what little pre-war lore there is about Hawaii, I think that is, generally speaking, a blank slate to tell your own story with, to talk about what Hawaii could have been like during moments leading up to the Great War. I feel like that is absolutely an opportunity that can be capitalized on.
I met Ash in another Discord server of gamers, and we were talking about Fallout stuff, and he mentioned that he was the lead on a New Vegas mod, and I told him how much I liked New Vegas and that I was a composer, and if he needed anything like that, and he said actually he did, and he offered me to be the composer.
You've mentioned there is going to be a lack of familiar factions in your mod. What's driven this? Is it purely the location, or have you got deeper narrative reasons?
For narrative logistics, I don't think it would make any sense for groups like the Enclave or Brotherhood or NCR to make reappearances on Hawaii.
Just some thoughts that I had about that, and I Googled some stats while you were talking here. To think, because I mean, I'm thinking really the only people who it would make sense to go to Hawaii would be either like the Enclave or the Brotherhood for means of securing any military technology that was left over. And according to Google, Hawaii is just under 2,500 miles from LA. So let's just say it's 2,000 miles from California, right? Because the range of a vertibird is 175 miles. So you're not going to make it unless the Enclave or somebody build a big wave breaker.
Yeah, Fallout 2, they needed Navarro actually right on the coast to refuel them. They didn't have that range.
Exactly.
That was something else that interested me about the mod. When you consider Hawaii and how Hawaii functions, would be cut off from everything else. Would there be a direct nuclear strike? Would it be impacted? How would the people there be living? And how could that relate into the Fallout universe?
What type of mod is this to you, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
So for me, I would have Fallout Ashfall be perfectly described as what would happen if Fallout and Deus Ex had a baby. And for those who don't know what Deus Ex is, it's a really good cyberpunk RPG. I would like to see Ashfall become a strong RPG with some elements of survival that you can opt into via the hardcore mode. We are balancing the new weapons and new items with hardcore mode in mind. Ideally, though, you should be able to just play Ashfall, treat it like an RPG, and not have to play with hardcore mode on. We hope that we can create an experience that would benefit from having hardcore mode enabled. I would like for this to be Fallout, but with some spices in the form of immersive sim elements thrown onto it. I would like to add more to New Vegas in terms of just what kind of stories we can tell. And as pretentious as I know that sounds, believe me when I say that this is first and foremost an RPG. Below there, it's like some immersive sim elements I hope we could add, and a experience that can be benefited from using hardcore mode.
Well, and I think when you say things like immersive sim elements, you mean stuff like instead of having to do a long quest to fix the generator, if you're skilled enough, then you can just do it. Because I appreciate those kind of things too, where you build a character a certain way, and then a situation unfolds, and it's not, well, you have to dance through the ring of fire, and then go and date my daughter, or whatever, to get the item to bring back. When it's like, look, man, I built a scientist for a reason. Like, let them just do it. I appreciate that kind of stuff. Those elements were what made Fallout 3 interesting when the first time I played it, walking up to the bomb in Megaton. And it's like, oh, well, you could deactivate it if you got the skill.
If you ever tried to make a build specifically so that you can repair Eddie, one of the iBot companions, without needing any of the extra materials, imagine Fallout, but with moments like those just scattered all over the game, where you can basically skip entire segments if you have the right character. I'll admit that's more of a dream game kind of idea than anything else.
We now have some questions from some fans.
Ooh, I have fans.
Yes. So the first one is from Nectar, who wonders what you can tell us about some of the other factions in the mod.
So, I want to preface this by saying that until we have everything ready to go in a design document, anything I say about the factions here is subject to change. So, with that being said, currently we have 3 raider gangs, 2 tribes, 1 miscellaneous science group, 1 crime syndicate, and 1 sort of main governmental faction are all planned to at least be worked on, or at least attempt to be worked on, in Ashfall. First thing we worked on before we even started development within the GEC was, okay, what is the story going to be? We need to have, at the very least, a loose outline of events that are going to happen in the main story before we do anything else. Because if we do not have that narrative agreed on once we start developing things, it's just going to all snowball into chaos. Or at least that's what my logic was. First raider group I want to touch on are the Sovereign Lions. The best way I can talk about the Sovereign Lions is imagine if a bunch of raiders came across the sort of remnants of U.S. history, right? Like they found 1 or 2 or 3 college textbooks about American history and were inspired to try and emulate that. Now I'm not saying we're doing a Caesar's Legion. We're not pulling an Edward Sallow here. They essentially want to form their own nation after certain events have taken place in Ashfall's story, or setting more so. This isn't anything the player sees. Currently, our plan for this Sovereign Alliance is for them to have turned one of the town hubs into sort of a raider encampment / trading hub, where they are blockading 2 other towns from trade and are leeching off the other 2 towns, trading between each other via a toll. The last thing I want any of the Sovereign Alliance to be compared to are raiders from Nuka World. They aren't really flashy at all. They don't have necessarily a gimmick beyond how they see themselves as a sort of new nation that is being born. So imagine if, say, the Great Khans ended up having a sort of hero complex, is the best way I could describe them.
So I've got another question from another one of the fans there. This one is from ELLB6. He's wondering if there'll be an opportunity for speech checks beyond just the normal speech skill.
Oh boy, I am so glad you're asking this. Okay. So, regarding speech, everyone knows that when it comes to speech, it's basically the win button, more or less, right? Well, my idea for speech, and this may or may not change in the near future, is to give some of speech's power to barter and charisma. In Ashfall, barter isn't just used for literal bartering. It could just be used for general deal-making as well, negotiations. And then with charisma, I think I would give it a buff where that you cannot access speech checks unless the person you're talking to already kind of likes you to a certain extent. So if you have like a charisma of 1, most people aren't going to listen to you because they're not that likable. And so because of that, it doesn't matter how convincing you are. If that person just doesn't like you, they're not going to listen to you. So I think having charisma sort of be a barrier of entry for certain speech checks could be a good way to reduce speech's powerful abilities within New Vegas's engine. And having other skill checks give access to alternative solutions. Let's say, for example, for a quest, there's a bunch of sick people that need help. Well, if your character's already built to be Mr. Medicine Man, then you can already go in there and help those people yourself. Or even just use your own equipment, like your own stim packs that you've collected out there. If there's like a group of townspeople that need help with some raiders, you can use your gun skill to teach them how to defend themselves, so that way you don't have to fight them yourself. Stuff like that.
How big is the dev team at the moment?
Currently, we have roughly 15 people, I want to say. I know for certain that 2 of those people are game developers in real life.
Are you using public resources to help manage the amount of workload?
Absolutely. Weapons are not a major concern for me. We are experimenting with making new models for armors and buildings and weapons from the ground up. We currently have the Sharktooth Sword, which is a whole new model. Everything else we hope to include either from modders' resources or eventually NIF-bashing weapons together. We briefly had Pineapple Surprise on our team who made the Wakizashi, the Ashfall Wakizashi, which we hope to include for Ashfall's version of the Yakuza. And other than that, we have another weapon, which we are keeping secret in every place except for the Discord. We do hope to implement it, it's just the sound design that we are missing. We do want to include weapons from Fallout 2 mainly and reintroduce them in Ashfall, which are most of them are available as modders' resources, gun-wise. Energy weapons is another story entirely. But when it comes to adding new guns to Ashfall, we can already get all the guns we want and then some from modders' resources. I've been using Butch's weapon. I think it's called like Butch's Final Weapon Pack for a majority, if not all, of Ashfall's new guns. The only thing I'm really missing is like a couple of energy weapons. And I think we've also been experimenting a little with having AI make art. Like, it's not like you'll see art made by an AI in Ashfall, but we are using it here and there to try and get a sort of visual heads up. We have our own concept artists. We do sometimes use AI art to sort of come up with a base idea, and then we just sort of build from there.
Jeffel has asked what the most challenging part of the project has been so far.
The more you learn about a thing, the more you realize how much you don't know about it. And that's how it feels working on the GEC all the damn time. Still, for example, I'm trying to implement weapon nifs into New Vegas just learn it myself, right? And then I try to insert the Winchester City Killer from Fallout 1 and 2, the combat shotgun, as it's called in there. And the textures just don't work. And I've tried everything. It just will not work. I'll work on it some other day. It's just moments like that where, oh, hey, it's just as simple as 1, 2, 3. And then once you try to implement like a new gun or a new like set of armor, it just will not work. And yet, oh god, it is frustrating. Imagine if the Gek was like a petulant child with like a gun. Just, you have to both manage this angry little kid, but you also have to worry about the fact that they have a gun. And so that's what it's like working with the Gek at its worst, where you can be working on the Gek, and then for some reason it just breaks. Like early on the project, half of Ashfall's map was just gone, with seemingly no explanation to why.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it was the closest the mod had ever come to dying.
Yeah, like nobody was sure. It's like, so do we still keep working on assets, or like what's going on with world space?
Hold the development. But like, here's the thing. Here's how a morning goes for that. I decide, hey, I'm going to spend one afternoon. I'm going to work on this in Ashfall. I boot up the Gek. Where's half the map? And it's like I go on to like there's like a tab where you can see like the height map of everything. Half of it's just gone. It's just gone. And to this day, I'm still not entirely sure what it happened to cause it. And luckily we recovered, of course. We had some backups, but it was thanks to that incident that we now have a dedicated system for that sort of thing.
A big part of Fallout is, of course, the music in the game. Wallaby, you are the composer of the mod. What has your approach to music been?
I want to create a soundscape that is evocative of some of the similar feelings that I remember the first time I played Fallout 1, where it's like, what is this new thing? What is this new space? Because every other game that has come after that has been related to to the previous titles and all of the lore and the expectations that are attached to that. And like we said before, Hawaii is a really interesting opportunity because it doesn't seem like there were many, if any at all, mentions of it in prior lore due to its remote location. So it is the discovery of a whole new world, because that's the appeal to these sorts of games, is the exploration. I got a kick out of the first time that I played New Vegas on launch, and I walked into Ranger Andy's bungalow, or I went onto the Fallout Wikia, and nobody else had done anything else. Like, oh, good, I get to make that entry, Ranger Andy. Da-da-da. The discovery is what's really interesting to me. And so that's where I'm starting with. And then from there, I want to generate not necessarily specifically a soundtrack, but more of a soundscape. There'll be maybe some traditional sounds, but also maybe some non-traditional sounds, because that's something that I really like. I like to take my little hand recorder and go out and capture stuff and then bring it back on my computer and play with it and get something weird out of it and see if it's something that I can do with it. That's fun.
Is there an area where you think the project needs some more help?
If anyone here even knows a guy who's on Hawaii, let them know that we're looking for them, because the way I see it, there's no way we can have anything story-wise approved until somebody who's actually from Hawaii can make sense of it. I forget who said it exactly. I want to say it's Josh Sawyer who said that if you cannot visit a place yourself, you have to do as much research as you can on it. And I agree with that. I'm doing as much research as I can. I just think that in addition to that, since no one on the dev team as of right now is from Hawaii, we need somebody who has their own personal experiences in this very real state to be here to make sure that we're not in over our heads when it comes to certain ideas about it.
Now, Wallaby, you've given us a piece of music to close the show. Can you tell me what it's called?
I haven't released anything from the mod yet. This is just a song that I've done in the last year in experimenting with the features that I have on this software. Because like I said, this is writing music on the computer of a new endeavor for me. But I got to play around with merging a couple of different styles. I'm really getting into using brass and strings like that. That's fun, especially because I grew up before I was in rock bands. Like I played in a lot of orchestras in school, so that's neat. And I think that's another thing that tied me back to Fallout. This piece is relative in Fallout 2 Away. It's called I Left My Heart in Dongdachan is a city. It's 45 minutes by train north of Seoul in South Korea, and it's where I was stationed in the army for a while, and it's actually where I played Fallout 3 for the first time and got back into Fallout. I thought it would be appropriate to share because there's some interesting moments in the song that to me represent naivete before a discovery of some magnitude is discovered, and then the consequences, if you will, of now to live with new information that maybe it's good or maybe it's bad. This song represents the sort of depth that I want to convey in the music, maybe sans auxiliary sound design.
Okay, well, I can see that the links with what you're talking about with the naivety, because that makes me think of the main quest in most of the Fallout games. You start with something very petty and personal, but not knowing anything about the world, and then halfway around it's all turned on its head. You've got knowledge of the world, and now you have to save it or end it as the
Exactly.
game goes. So thanks again for joining us there, Ash and Wallaby, and as promised, this is Wallaby's track, I Left My Heart in Dong Duchong. And as always, please remember to turn off your Pip-Boy.